How many women would be willing to do something like this? Hand over the husband she had lived with for nearly 40 years to another woman. Not because of a lack of love, not because of betrayal. And in this story, no one is at fault. That woman believed. He must be allowed to live with dignity. But what happened in the past that made such a decision inevitable? And why, when she passed away quietly, did an entire other nation bow their heads in mourning? Nearly 40 years with her Japanese husband, a Russian wife let him reunite with a wife he thought had died. Everything began before World War II, when Mr. Yasuburo, the son of a well-off family in Japan, left his homeland with his young wife Hisako, seeking the Korean peninsula in hopes of building a better life. There they had 2 children, a son and a daughter. But the war changed everything. In 1945, when World War II ended, amidst the post-war turmoil, the Soviet Red Army advanced into the region, and many Japanese people were rounded up and accused of being spies. Mr. Yasuburo was sent to a gulag camp in Magadan, far eastern Siberia, with a sentence of 10 years in prison. Many years later, Yasuburo was released, but officials forgot to include his name on the list of prisoners allowed to return home. As time passed, Yasuburo thought his wife and children were likely dead, and he had nowhere to return to, carrying within him the fear of facing his homeland after many years of living in the Soviet Union. Therefore, Yasuburo decided to live a new life, becoming a Soviet citizen and taking the name Yasha Ivanovich. Love born from shared pain. In 1959, Yasuburo met Klavdia, and both shared one thing in common. They had survived the Stalinist concentration camps. She was sentenced to 7 years in prison for the crime of squandering socialist property. This resilient woman said, "I went through hell, but I did not break down, nor did I even utter a single obscenity. This camp ruined many women. It is terrifying to recall those things. The most important thing for me was keeping my soul intact." According to recorded documents, before her arrest, Klavdia was married and had a son. However, subsequent information about this son is no longer mentioned in public records. As for her husband, he had married another woman. At her lowest point emotionally, she coincidentally met Yasuburo and felt a strong sense of empathy for this man. Klavdia recalled, "We met in the Bryansk region in a resettlement camp. I saw Yasha, whose face was not Russian. He was thin, oppressed, and in his eyes was pain. That image made my heart ache." However, they did not immediately start a relationship because she was apprehensive about a romance with someone imprisoned for anti-Soviet espionage, even though she knew he was innocent. It was not until the early 1960s, when she moved to the village of Progress in the Russian Far East, that he wrote her a letter suggesting he wanted to join her. But she refused out of fear. She said, "I only told one close friend that I was corresponding with a former prisoner of war." Yet, the affection at that time was too profound. Yasuburo could not forget that woman and felt he could not live without her. Thus, Yasuburo crossed 6 Russian time zones to be with her. His love moved her, and she finally agreed to be his wife, and they lived together very happily for nearly 40 years. He became a barber, a photographer, and also practiced acupuncture. The couple grew tomatoes and cucumbers, raised a goat, and kept a hive of bees. He never raised his voice to her, regretting only that they did not have children together. She confided, "The entire region could not find a second man like him, one who neither drank alcohol nor smoked." Yasuburo even bought 2 coffins and stored them in the attic, hoping that if they passed away, they would both depart on the same day. His first wife waited 51 years without remarrying. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, a local resident shared a story with his Japanese business partner about a Japanese man who had lived in the area for many years. The businessman returned to Japan and began searching for the relatives of Yasuburo Hachiya. To everyone's surprise, they located his younger brother, his daughter, and eventually his Japanese wife Hisako. They had all survived the war and returned to Japan. Only their son had passed away in Korea. When her husband was imprisoned, Hisako returned to Japan with their daughter Kumiko and worked as a nurse to support herself. Throughout her life, she carefully saved every penny from her modest salary to build a small house for herself and her missing husband. Even though she wasn't sure whether he was still alive, Hisako kept the house and her bank savings account registered in her husband's name. Learning that his first wife was still alive turned Yasuburo's world upside down. He never imagined that Hisako had remained faithful, waiting for him all those 51 years. His daughter and brother traveled to the village of Progress to find him. They tried to persuade him to return to Japan, to be with his first wife, who had waited so long and endured so much hardship. But Yasuburo refused. He told his Russian wife, "I can't leave you. You're everything to me." Klavdia was heartbroken, but she still urged her husband to go back to his first wife, pointing out that Hisako had sacrificed her entire youth waiting for him. She also believed that with his declining health, he would receive better medical care in Japan. Despite her husband's objections, Klavdia quietly arranged everything on her own. She obtained an exit passport for him, withdrew their savings, converted the money to dollars, and bought his plane ticket along with funds for living expenses and travel. Ultimately, she decided to divorce him so that he could receive a pension in Japan and have full rights to own and inherit property. Faced with everyone's urging and Klavdia's unwavering determination, Yasuburo reluctantly agreed to return. The farewell kiss. In March 1997, the day came for Yasuburo to leave for Japan. Amid the vast expanse of snow that still hadn't melted, Klavdia kissed her beloved husband goodbye one last time, and they held each other tightly. Klavdia said, "His wife needs to hold him again before they die. My heart feels torn in two letting him go. But no one is to blame. It's fate. What's important is that he'll live better there. He's suffered so much, and he probably wouldn't survive here." After Yasuburo returned to Japan and reunited with Hisako, he continued sending Klavdia small gifts and called her every Saturday without fail. He kept begging her to come visit because he missed her terribly. The story of this couple became famous in Japan. Klavdia was admired for her self-sacrifice, and the Japanese public even organized a fundraiser to cover the cost of her trip to Japan. Later, when she was over 80, Klavdia finally traveled there. The two wives met and embraced, crying together. There was no jealousy or blame. They didn't need words to understand each other's deepest feelings. Klavdia visited Japan 2 more times. During her last trip, she attended the premiere of a play based on the love story between the Russian woman and the Japanese POW. Both Yasuburo and Hisako wanted Klavdia to stay in Japan permanently, but she declined. Sometime later, Hisako passed away. After arranging her funeral, Yasuburo begged Klavdia to move to Japan to live with him, or else he would return to Progress to spend his remaining years with her. But Klavdia refused, telling him she wanted him to live with dignity in his final years in Japan. A quiet death. A nation in mourning. Klavdia Novikova passed away in September 2014, alone at the age of 94. Only a handful of people attended her funeral. No family, no close friends, as nearly everyone from her life had already passed on. In Japan, however, the major TV networks covered the news extensively. The Russian wife of Yasuburo Hachiya has died. Not long after, a deeply moving letter arrived in the village of Progress from Yasuburo. He knew she could no longer receive it, but it was something he needed to do. "Klavdia, when I learned of your passing, grief overwhelmed my heart. I tried calling you on August 20th, my 96th birthday, but I couldn't get through. For the 40 years we lived together in Russia, you were always by my side, always supporting me. Thank you for everything. I was only able to return to Japan because of you, and I am endlessly grateful. I remember how we even prepared 2 coffins, one for each of us. If I could, I would rush to your side right now and hold you tight in my arms. But now I'm powerless. Rest in peace, my beloved Klavdia. Your Yasuburo.